All right, here we go. Right into it on a Wednesday. Happy belated Valentine's Day to all of you. It is that time of year. No, it's not the holiday season, although we're getting close to the lucky St. Patrick's Day, and hopefully you were kind to your significant other on Valentine's Day and had yourself a wonderful holiday. Welcome in. It's a great night tonight. We're feeling really, really good in the house. Gem City Sports Podcast coming to you live here from our home studio, wherever you may get your podcast, whoever you may be watching. Welcome in tonight. Special show this evening. We had Michaela Presser-Palmer on last week. If you missed that episode, go back and check it out. District 10's all-time leading scorer. We had a feature with her for a nice half-hour episode last week, and that's leading in, of course, to the District 10 playoffs. So check that out wherever you get your podcast. We are on Twitter. We are on Instagram. We're on YouTube. We're on all your social media platforms, including Twitch, if that's what you fancy. At Gem City SN is where you can find us. We have new episodes every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. The Draft Podcast with Paul Adamczak on Tuesdays. Us here on Wednesdays. Thursdays is Off the Record with the Erie Otters. And it's all brought to you by our friends at Rebich Investments, keeping financial guidance simple. If you want more info, it's very easy. Go to their website, www.rebichinvestments.com, or just simply call their phone number during normal business hours at 814-734-3433, 814-734-3433. Rebich Investments, keeping financial guidance simple. Got a bit of pep in our step tonight, Tom Koval, as we start our show this evening. It's playoff time. And we were joking before the show began that it just doesn't feel like it, right? Partially because it's 50 outside today. Also partially because at the time we're recording this, which is right before the first playoff games, it just doesn't feel like we've ever gotten enough regular season to study these teams, to get a sense of where these teams are at. And I'm sure for you as a coach, it came quick because, we talk about the regular season and how it feels so long, right? In November, the December days, dog days of January, then you get to February, by God, it just changes, right?
It certainly does. I mentioned the other night to a couple of my friends who were former coaches. One thing that I miss is that February coaches meeting for the Erie County All-Star game, where we all get together and we talk about our teams, and we used to exchange VCR tapes and CDs depending on how old of a coach you were, and it really brought some more life into you to see the other coaches that were in the playoffs, and you knew there was some excitement coming. So I definitely miss that part of the season. The regular season always seems to go so fast. Once you get caught up in all the games in and out. So this is a great time of year. I know there's a lot of excitement for the kids, and the coaches just get a kind of a breath of new life into their systems after the long winter, and all of a sudden we're in the playoffs, and it just gets everybody excited.
I will say, good on your part that you had actual meetings about actual all-star games. You're already ahead of the curve of the NBA in terms of what they do nowadays. a little bit of a shot there. I'm not an NBA guy. I'm less of an NBA guy now after the All-Star break. That should all be canceled anyway, but so be it. It is what it is. We're past that now. All right, Tom, D-10 playoffs. We got a lot of brackets to get into. We're going to be breaking a lot of them down, predicting some as well. Some of the big ones, not all of them. There are way too many for us to go in just a little bit of a show here, but let's start on the boys side, and I think the game you and I know better than any, right? And that's McDowell Erie in Class 6A. And we start there in what's the third matchup between these two. It's traditional Thursday slot, which has been traditional since the COVID years. 7:30 start at Prep in what's going to be a bloodbath. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in just the way that these two teams played. When you look at this game, Tom, and I want you to start with going back to your days when you were coaching in Erie. You had already seen McDowell twice. More often than not, you were 1-1 when the regular season series ended. What has to be the strategy, or what strategy did you employ going into the championship game, knowing that they know you, you know them, but you got to still grind it out, and this is the one that matters?
That's something that when I was coaching that we built all season long. Right, it came down to the playoffs at the end in that one game that you needed to beat McDowell. So we talked about it from the preseason, right, when we're having open gyms, and then once we started doing our practices and our scrimmages, everything that we did, win or lose, was a building block to get to your best at the end of the season when you had to play that game. So we wanted them to be focused and ready, and like, this is what we've been working for, right? It's not just another game, which no playoff game is, but I really wanted them focused coming into that game, that no matter what happened in the past, right, that just made us better win or lose to them. All right, but we had to compete in this game, and I'm sure McDowell and every playoff coach does the same type of thing. Right. But I just wanted my guys healthy, and I wanted them mentally ready. So that was such a big part of it, to kind of prepare them for a loss. Right. Maybe you lose to McDowell at the end of the season, and you need them to be able to push right through that and get into the playoff game. Or in Erie's case, they won. Right. You don't want them to be overconfident going in that game also, right? Because it comes down to, I think I say this all the time, 16, 17-year-old boys, right? What are they going to do in a game? You can't be prepared for that. So you just got to be at your best, and hopefully the ball bounces your way a few times, because you need a little bit of luck in the playoffs.
I think that's a perfect point about it, because how many times did we see? I mean, I witnessed a lot of your games because I covered them when you played McDowell, and it literally was the first team to go on a bit of a run probably wins the game. And that run doesn't even necessarily mean that you're scoring points deservedly so. You're just getting lucky with a couple of turnovers. You get a bit of momentum here, a bit of momentum there. You know the crowd is going to be a factor too, right? Because those games are always packed no matter what. And I think what is so fascinating about this game in particular, and something that I think will be a huge key, is what the point total is. We've seen the opening two matchups between these two teams. It was a 66-55 win for McDowell. 53-49, Erie got the better of McDowell in the last game in what was a defensive slugfest. And you and I talked a lot about it on this show. Probably McDowell's worst shooting performance of the season, specifically in games that were important and meaningful to them. I can't wait to see what the final scoreline of this game is, Tom, because, you know, you could argue they've both been low scoring, right? But I think McDowell scoring 66 against the way Coach Pulliam and Erie plays their defense was pretty good the first time around. They shot the ball decent. They got the ball to the Marsh cousins in the corner, specifically Liam, who we know is so great at shooting from that specific spot on the floor. Leo Finazzo was really, really sound defensively in that game. And then Erie turned it around in game number two. And I think we really saw, if people hadn't seen already, the coming out party of what Jaden Stewart can do to take over a game. How do you foresee? We'll predict the game, or look at the game in a second, specifically in terms of final score. But do you see this being more of an offensive shootout based on how great defensively they've been, and maybe we see some different transitions of strategy that we haven't seen? Or is it more of the same defensively and one in the trenches in this game on Thursday, Tom?
Boy, that's a great question. And I think depending on which way the game goes is going to determine who wins, right? I think you made the point of the scores of both games. When McDowell won, they scored 66 points. And granted, that's not as much points that a prep team and McDowell game is, but the defense is a lot different, right? We've talked about that in several other episodes. But 66 is a lot of points against an Erie High team, and they shot the ball pretty well against them in that game. And then they only scored 49 in their loss. So that's a big discrepancy. You know, I went back and looked at the stats. If I recall, 5 for 25 McDowell was from three in that second game. So I think it's really going to come down to how well McDowell shoots it. Right? It's difficult to defend the 3-point line because it's deeper away. All right. So if you're helping on penetration, right, they're going to get their shots. You see the Marsh boys get their shots up, and whether they go in or not is going to be the tale of this game, I think. You know, Erie's going to probably battle with their man-to-man defense and maybe trap a little bit and try to pound it inside to Stewart, right? That slows the game down. I think that's a big advantage for them if they can, right? And they're going to guard the 3-point line to try to contest those threes and maybe mix up the defense. I think we talked about that in one of our episodes as well. If you can change your defense and play man-to-man to make them shoot fast, and then maybe switch it up to a zone where they're on their standstill shooters, right? That can mess up their rhythm a little bit. So I would predict that Coach Pulliam's probably going to throw a little bit of multi-defensive fronts for them to try to mess with their shooting consistency, and that's going to really affect the game when it comes down to it. Kevin on the other side, right, especially with them being smaller, right, I'd predict him to be probably playing some type of zone to try to keep that ball out of Stewart's hands. But then again, we talked about Sebastian being out, right, with the point guard out. You know, maybe they're going to try to put some pressure on them and make them turn it over because, you know, sometimes you can struggle with that when you have a new point guard running the show.
I'm really fascinated. You bring up the great point about Wolford. That to me is the number one storyline of this game, and the fact that he's not eligible. And I think the question now becomes for Erie. We saw this a bit in the McDowell game a few weeks back, and truth be told, I don't even think Wolford played that well. And I called the game, and I thought it was really the Stewart show. But I'm curious to see how much Joe Jones gets the ball right from the outside, how much they allow him to shoot from deep. But specifically, I really want to look at the Akeelan Pernices, the Riley Heem Alvertons, those guys who, in traditional game settings, when Erie is fully healthy, they are not the shooters. Right. But do they now have to be? Do you have to play more of a perimeter game if Jaden Stewart's going to be locked down? Because, without Sebastian, that's McDowell's strategy, right? Kevin O'Connor doesn't hold the program record for wins for nothing. He knows strategy. He knows how to lock down your best player. I also look at somebody too, like, is a Charlie Williams off the bench going to get more playing time? Do you try to put these shooters on the edge where, if you're Coach Pulliam, Tom, is it a situation that you almost admit the fact at the beginning of the game, Stewart's not going to be a factor, so you try to compensate, maybe overcompensate for it? What's the thought process in your mind about trying to put more shooters on the floor for Erie? I know it's not what they want to do. It might be, though, in my view, what they have to do if they want to win this game on Thursday.
Well, I'm a big proponent of let's play our game, right? What are we good at? Right. And Shannon's probably going to be the same way. Like, we've been really successful putting the ball inside to Stewart. Right. Let's go back to that. And we're going to really try to find a way to to play the way we want to play. Right. It's really hard to change your personnel and put guys in different situations. You want your guys to be comfortable. They're successful in the things that they're doing. So I see them kind of doing the same things. But to your point, right, you need somebody to step up in the playoffs, right? Elverton likes to shoot a lot of threes. I see him in the hallways of school, and I'm like, man, you're a big kid. Like, oh, you get inside, right? Let's get some layups, get some mid-range jumpers, right? It'd be nice to see him help with a little bit of the scoring. Charlie Williams, I'm sure Shannon's evaluating all those guys in practice this week. Who's playing really well, right? They had a couple games that they played after region play was done. One was against Dunkirk, who's not very good. And then they played the Erie Prep Academy, the post-grad team. So they had a few games in between there too. So he's probably evaluating that and seeing who's playing really well to see who can fill that void for Wolford being out.
I'm not going to ask you to predict the game, Tom, because I know where the loyalties lie, although I know the respect you have for Coach O'Connor. So it's not like you dislike McDowell, but give me a couple of keys, one for each team in this game. You mentioned, of course, Erie trying to get the ball to Stewart down low. McDowell's going to want to play more of a zone. Give me one key for each team that you think has to happen if either squad wants to go to the state subs.
McDowell's going to struggle if they don't shoot the ball well. So they need to make sure that they find some good shots and flow and make some scores from the outside, because that's what their game plan is. That's how they played all year. So if they don't shoot it well, they're going to struggle. They're going to be in trouble. I think the key on the other side of that is for Erie High to really change the rhythm on their shooting, man. Like, to mix up the defenses, right, and make them uncomfortable. Because if they're not scoring from the outside, Erie's going to get the rebounds. They're a bigger team, right, and they can go down and really pound the ball inside and hopefully just give it to them that way.
I will say this. I think the one thing going for Erie is that they've had to now in the last few games play more without Wolford. I mean, it's not that he hasn't played the last couple of games, but we saw in the prep game, he wasn't as big of a factor in that 12-point loss. There was 27 from Stewart in the game. So Erie, I think, is starting to figure it out without Wolford. And I think they have the shooters to be able to stay in the game. I totally agree with you. It all comes down to McDowell shooting. And I also think it comes down to pace. Like, I expected in the McDowell-Erie round 2 that if the Trojans sped up the game, that Erie wouldn't be able to catch up. And that was totally the opposite. Erie actually took advantage of it. They used Stewart down low. They were able to chip and block a bunch, go from high to low, and almost win that quick tempo game where if it was 4-on-4 or 3-on-3, they knew they would win those battles because they have the biggest and baddest guy on the floor. So I think that could be something very interesting to watch. I'm going to pick only because I feel like it's important to put myself on the record because I'm wrong 90% of the time. I think because Wolford isn't in the game, I think McDowell wins close only because Erie doesn't have the depth of options without Sebastian Wolford that otherwise they would have. I think it's not necessarily a shooting touch, Tom, that will be missed. It's his ability to dish. And without him, I think Stewart maybe doesn't get as many opportunities in tight. And I think that's kind of something for Sebastian that's kind of a little bit overlooked by some maybe this season is we expect him to score, right? He's one of the leading scorers on this Erie team, but he's as good, if not better, as a passer of the basketball as he is a shooter of the basketball.
Yeah, that's a good point. And he's a strong leader with the ball, and not to take anything from Pernice or Joe Jones, right? That they're just a different position. So to put them in that situation, not that they can't do it, we're going to see, right? We have to put them in that position and see what happens. So hopefully they succeed and rise up to the challenge.
We can't wait. Thursday's going to be a great night. It's going to really kick off the championship season for District 10 because the brackets we're going to get into, especially the next one we're going to get into, has what seems to be 5 weeks worth of games, although it's going to run pretty quickly. And that's 6A for you. McDowell, Erie, Thursday night at the Haggerty. We can't wait. Make sure to go out, support the two teams in that game. Round 3 is going to be a blast. Winner of that moves on to the state sub-regional. Let's move on to 4A, Tom. I don't know where the heck we start with this. 16-team bracket, although there's not 16 teams within the bracket. A couple of buys sprinkled in there. Fairview gets a buy. Sharon gets a buy. Cathedral Prep gets a bye. Those are the top 3 seeds in the bracket, and then Hickory draws Franklin, the 13th team. So it is a 16-layer bracket, but 13 teams that are involved with this. So let's just start with this, Tom. When you look at the bracket, any surprises in terms of teams that you thought may have been underranked, teams that you thought may have been overranked? Your analysis with the brackets and the matchups that we got in 4A as you see them here.
I think they did a good job seeding them. I'm sure there's arguments here or there where you could move some people a little bit, but high school basketball is so difficult to predict. I think matchups make a huge influence on the outcomes of games. You see a really good team like Harbor Creek who really struggles with the matchup with Fairview both times they played them, right? But Harbor Creek's a very good team. I would not want to play them in the playoffs, right? You have some really good teams that have been playing well at the end of the year, right? I wouldn't want to be matched up with Farrell right now, and Girard drew them, right? And which is funny because Girard has been a really tough matchup for Fairview, right? They got them both times. So it's really hard to come down and seed these guys. I think the strong finish by Fairview and winning the region, it really helps them to get that bye because there's some tough outs in this bracket, and the less amount of playoff games you have to play, the better chance you have of surviving. So it'll be really interesting to see how some of these games come out, especially with some teams that haven't played each other. So there'll be some different matchups that we get to see. So it'll be real exciting to see these guys go at it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it is so fascinating to me, Tom, because when I looked at the bracket for the first time, the first thing I immediately thought was, wow, a lot of these teams that are the better seed have matchups that they would rather not prefer in the first round. And if they get through the first round, matchups that they would prefer. I think that's the crazy thing about the way that this bracket come out, right? You talk about Girard. Farrell's been a really, really tough team down the stretch for anybody, and the fact that they're the 10 seed speaks to the depth. But I think Girard and Sharon, I don't know if Mark Schreier is going to hate that matchup per se. I think he believes he's got a talented enough and at least quick enough team to match up with Sharon. So that on the bottom half of the bracket's curious. And then if Girard can get by those 2 games you mentioned, Fairview, right? Like, we've seen it now twice that they've gotten the better of their rival from the West. I look at the top half of the bracket, and I'll say this much. I think Northeast and Oil City could be the game of the night in the first round. And keep in mind, we're recording this before the brackets begin, with the games happening on Tuesday. I think Northeast could be a real dark horse there in the 9. And, if they were the 10 seed, could they be a favorite to make the semifinals? Of course, they have a great chance in the first round, but then you would get prep in round number 2. So the games that really stick out to me in the first round, Tom, I think you hit on a few of them. Girard Farrell is going to be a heck of a game. I think Oil City Northeast would be great as well. I would not sleep on Warren Grove City in the 6-11 matchup because I think Grove City every year is a tough out, and I think they'd give Fairview a real big run for their money if they can make the second round of the tournament. And Tom, the way this bracket works, all you have to do is make the semis and you're in states because 5 teams from this bracket go to the state playoffs.
Yeah, I had that circle. They take 5. So the losers bracket's going to be a great thing. Once you get to the semis, you breathe a deep breath of relief. But yeah, good point. Grove City is very well coached. I scrimmage them many times, and they do a great job of mixing up their defenses. They're very athletic. That's a tough game, and Coach Flaherty, he doesn't really want to play anybody. He probably just wants to go right to the championship. Right? He's going to be working really hard because he doesn't. And none of these coaches really think that they're just going to breeze through on any games, right? They know how competitive both of these North and South District 10 teams are. So everybody's going to be coming in prepared and ready to battle.
So you look at the first round, and again, I mentioned this, we're recording before the first round game. So when this comes out, our predictions will look silly, but we're trying to do this before we get the tournament underway. But when you look at Cinderella stories in this bracket, Tom, I think really anybody, save for maybe 3 teams, could make a great run and we wouldn't be truthfully shocked. Is there one team that is not a top 3-4 seed that you could really see making a nice run? I mean, I think Grove City there at 6 could be an option. I don't think you ever count out Girard. As long as Kenny Godoy's scoring the basketball, he's a candidate. What's the one team that's the dark horse under the radar candidate that you think could surprise a lot of people and maybe find themselves in the Final Four or the Final 2 of 4A?
I think, you mentioned Girard as a 7 seed, right? With Kenny, that keeps them in any game. But I think that's an easy one. I think I would go with Northeast, right? With Big Willie Shunk in there. They got Crozier. They got some guards that can shoot it. They're athletic. They play fast, right? They're big inside also. I think they have a lot of different components to their team that allows them to match up really well with anybody. Huge win against Harbor Creek, which actually sealed the region title for Fairview, right? So that was a really big game for them to win, and that's a backdoor rivalry as well. So I would go with Northeast as a scary little dark horse there.
It's funny about Northeast and the way that their bracket matches up, because they're probably frustrated that they have to draw Prep in the second round if they get by Oil City. But if you're the rest of the field that does not make the semis, you're probably furious if Northeast is the team to drop to the losers bracket in the second round. Because I think Northeast would be, a dark horse favorite, and maybe in my view, based on how things turn out, the favorite to be the 5th and final team if indeed Cathedral Prep does beat them. And I think that makes for a far interesting bracket of 4 teams as we start getting down to the end of the postseason. Again, Prep's going to be a tough matchup, but to your point, I think Northeast has a plausible path to make states, even if it is not a direct path through to the semifinals. And I think that's advantageous for the Pickers.
I agree. I mean, it's certainly plausible, but you look at that second round, if things go the way I predict with Harbor Creek beating Fort LaBeouf and that Hickory matchup, possibly if they beat Franklin, that's going to be a really tough matchup, Hickory and Harbor Creek. And the loser of that game would be playing Northeast if they win and lose to Prep. So that's a really tough first game in the losers bracket. So that'll be a battle also if it plays out that way. It'll be exciting to watch that.
That is one of the cool things about having 5 teams that come out of 4A, is that I almost think the losers bracket, Thomas, is exciting, if not maybe more intense than the championship bracket, because it is 4 teams for 1 spot, and you're going to have a Donnybrook no matter what, right? Whether it's on the top of the bracket and that Northeast potential. I mean, obviously, if Prep were to drop to the losers bracket, my goodness, then it becomes insane. But, the potential for like a Northeast, Hickory, Harbor Creek, and then on the bottom half of the bracket, I mean, goodness, Fairview, Grove City, or Warren is going to be in that bracket as well. One of those 3 teams is going to have to drop. So it's crazy to think about the talent and quality of teams that will be battling it out for 1 spot. But I think that brings me to the prediction part of this, and the storyline of 4A is, can anybody beat Prep? And I think we've seen this season that this has obviously been the most dominant team on the boys' side in District 10. We know what they're about. We know what they can do. Prep or the field, Tom, if you had to give your prediction for this bracket, given what the Ramblers have done this season?
That's an easy one. I'll take Prep. I think they're too deep. Their top 3 players are too dominant. They probably shouldn't be in 4A. I was talking to a former Prep alum and said, we always played up. We were always 4A when we, they're going to run away with this 4A bracket in District 10. No doubt about that. Anything can happen, but that's where I'd be putting my money.
Yeah, I'll go Prep too. I think they'd be the favorite, probably a pretty heavy favorite in the 6A championship game too, without a doubt. We've already seen them beat McDowell. We've already seen them beat Erie. They're 4-0 in those games. I'm with you. We obviously can debate whether they should be up, whether they should be down, but I think the bracket certainly shows that they are by far the clear and ahead favorite. Before we get out of 4A, Tom, give me the other 4 teams that you think are making the state playoffs. This is where I think really we get into the meat of this. We kind of foreshadowed a couple of things here. What are the other teams that you think are joining prep in the state postseason in 4A? I'm fascinated to get your thoughts on this.
Well, I'm going to go with Fairview. I think Fairview gets through that first round game against the winner of Grove City Warren. So I'm going to go with them for sure. I think the winner of that Harbor Creek, I think Harbor Creek gets Hickory. That puts them in. I think Northeast gets Oil City. They play Hickory after they lose to prep. I think Northeast beats Hickory. That gets them in. And then my last spot, I'm gonna go with Kenny and get Girard in there.
You know, it's your brackets, I want to say, in a way, are similar to mine. I think that's a really, really smart play. I think Girard is, without a doubt, a favorite if they drop to the losers bracket to be there. I think Northeast is a dark horse candidate as well. My picks are as follows. I think Prep obviously wins the bracket. I think Fairview is going to get in. I just think ultimately they're too good and they're too deep, but I do think that it could be a problem if they get Girard in the semifinals. And I actually think Girard Sharon could be the matchup of the quarterfinals that no one talks about, because I think, as like I said, as long as Kenny's in play, this team has a real legitimate shot. I do think Sharon will get in. I think you're going to see Fairview and Sharon as the two teams from the semis that will probably be the 2 or the 3. Obviously, one of them would get to the finals. So then you'd have, in my bracket, you'd have Prep that gets in, Fairview that gets in. I think you have Sharon that gets in. I think Harbor Creek is going to get to the semifinals and they're going to get in without question. I think that they're good enough. And I, again, without seeing much of Hickory, I think that they're big and strong enough to be able to play with anybody. And they're also too, they're veteran. I have a lot of, I don't want to say history, if you will, but I know a lot of the guys down at Harbor Creek. JT Del Sandro, I think, is such an underrated player. If he was 7 inches taller, we'd be talking about him for District 10 Player of the Year without question. So Harbor Creek, I think, is going to be in there. And then it's a crapshoot at the bottom of the bracket. To be different, I'll take Northeast because I was talking about them, Tom. I think, but I think the Northeast and Girard of the world could really make a run for that final spot. I think it's just going to depend on who gets eliminated and what the matchups become after round number 2. So fascinating stuff in 4A, 5 spots, which is almost unheard of. But it's going to be a fun bracket. And I think, Tom, to be honest with you, although it detracts from some other brackets, I think this is what I have always wanted in District 10, to have a bunch of teams vying for a bunch of spots. And here we go.
Yeah, I hate to use Tom Reisenweber's line of blame 6 classes, but one of my favorite times of coaching was when I was at Central Tech and we were AAA with Harbor Creek and Girard. We had a bunch of great coaches in that region, and we got to play those teams. It was very similar to this 4A bracket, right, with Grove City and Hickory and Farrell down there as well. And it was so nice to have a big playoff bracket and see teams that you don't see all the time. It was a lot of fun, I think, for the players, the coaches, and the fans.
Yeah, we get to see it again in 4A. A time of this recording, games have not started yet, but they will. So when you see tomorrow, you'll see how crazy our predictions are with this episode coming out on Wednesday night. But of course, these quarterfinals are on Friday, so those should be some tantalizing matchups as well. We'll break down those games next episode. We're going to talk about the girls basketball side in just a moment, go through a couple of brackets on the girls side. Of course, though, I want to thank our sponsor, Rubbish Investments, for keeping financial guidance simple and being our proud sponsor of this show. If you want more info, very simple, go to their website, www.rubbishinvestments.com, or call their phone number during normal business hours at 814-734-3433, 814-734-3433. Let's go from the top, at least the 2 classes we're talking about, Tom, and work our way down. Let's go 4A girls basketball. In what is a fascinating classification because of the parity that we have seen, specifically between 2 teams in 4A in the last 3 or 4 seasons. I feel like we have flip-flopped Fairview and Harbor Creek almost every single year. You threw in a Wilmington, I think, the one year that upset Fairview a few years back. That was the Hope Garrity days when Fairview was the number 1 seed. But really, it's been the Tigers and the Huskies that have ruled this class. Break down this bracket for me, Tom, because it's a little bit interesting this year. Clearly, Fairview HC are the 2 favorites. There's no question about that. But then you look at the rest of the bracket. We've talked a lot about Corey and what they've been able to do with their team game. I don't think Slippery Rock is one to shake your head about either. And then there are some other teams that could be really sneaky. How do you assess this 4A girls bracket? And is it just as simple as Fairview versus Harbor Creek? Let's write it off, move on, and get to the championship game.
Yeah, I think it is right, my only, and you don't want to say that these teams don't have a chance, but the way Fairview's playing right now, right, they're getting to the championship game, right? So I'm gonna sit hard on that. And again, we have 15, 16, 17-year-old girls. We don't know what's gonna happen, right? There could be an injury. There could be a girl that had a really bad day and she just plays poorly. I've been on that side of things, coaching as well. So. But I'm going to go with Fairview getting into the championship. My question is the bottom of that bracket, because you have Harbor Creek and Corey, right? And there's been some battles in those games. I know the last time that Harbor Creek played Corey, they got him pretty good. I saw Corey with a big win at Fairview. So that's going to be a battle there. But if I'm going to finish it out, I think Fairview's playing very well. They really played well against Harbor Creek in that final game to clinch the region championship. And then they finished it out at home. I guess they really needed to beat GM to really get that region championship. But they're playing really well right now, and not just Paige. Shout out to her. She just committed to Gannon University, which is awesome. Her mom and dad both played at Gannon. So she's been playing really well, but you got to look at Ella Pizzo, who's been playing really well the last couple games. They're getting a lot of scoring from their other girls as well. So the defense they play is going to be really tough for anybody to get a win against them, I think, in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think until you get to the championship game, there's really nobody on the top half of the bracket that I think can crack this Fairview defense. We've already seen General McLean has struggled to do it. Even Slippery Rock, who probably is the best team left in that top half of the bracket outside of Fairview, I don't think they have the offense to be able to cope with the way that Coach Garrity plays his defense. And I think, too, that there's the experience factor, too, right? And that Fairview has been in this thick of things or winning championships for as long as we can remember. And they just have that experience factor with them. They're going to get a great opportunity with a bye on Wednesday to go with Saturday and be the heavy favorite of whoever wins the GM Franklin game. And at that point, it's the semifinals against the Slippery Rock and Oil City squad, who they can have success against, no question. I want to dive for a second into the bottom half of the bracket here, Tom, because I think there's 4 teams that come from this bracket. I think we can all have a pretty good idea of who's going to get there, right? Fairview's going to get there. Harbor Creek's going to get there. We think Corey's probably going to get there. And then really question becomes Slippery Rock, Oil City, flip a coin in that one, right? But
right.
When we get to, if we do, but assuming we get to Corey and Harbor Creek, it was a 32-28 game 5 days ago when they played. And I'm really curious to see if Corey is capable of putting together enough offense to win games. When they win games low scoring. There's no doubt about that. Their defense is just as good as anybody's. And I don't think the 4 losses to end the season is really indicative of who they are, because 3 of those games were powerhouses, 2 of which were in your region who are ranked above you in the District 10 standings. So how would you assess that, of that potential matchup in round number 3, if it gets there in the semifinals like we believe it would?
Well, I think a big thing for them is, obviously, to get there, you have to win a game, but they have to win that first round game and really build a lot of confidence, right? They came off the season losing 4 games in a row, and I know that they were all close, but that doesn't make it any easier. I think one of the biggest things for a team rolling into playoffs is to be happy, right? To be on that roll, to be, on cloud 9 because you're playing well and everybody knows you're playing well and the team chemistry is all clicking and you got players on the bench that are happy because they're playing more because we're winning, right? And those are important things. So I struggle with them coming off of 4 losses, being successful in the playoffs. It's a really hard thing to overcome.
I think for me, the big key, if they get to the game, is how many points does Denning score in this Harbor Creek Corey game? Because I think if you can hold her to under 20, I actually like your chances. I almost equivocate. It's the same math that I do, and I will do in a few minutes when we talk about 3A, is how low can you hold MPP? If you can do that, I think you have a chance to win the game. I think it's similar to this with Corey. If they can shut down Denning to the extent of less than 20, I think they've got a shot to win. But Corey's going to win games by scoring in the 30s. They may get to 40-42 in that first game, whoever it is, whoever wins that Titusville-Fort LaBeouf game. But I think to win the tournament, they're going to have to hold opponents to the 30s. If you're a fan of offense, you're not going to want to watch the 4A girls bracket because it's a lot of defense, but I think we love that in this area, in this neck of the woods. I'm with you. I would say it's probably Fairview or bust, Harbor Creek being a close second, but I think Corey could definitely spring what I would call a mini upset in the semis. But I think all those teams are safe. I think Harbor Creek is safe, Fairview is safe, and Corey is safe. To get to that state playoff level, and then again flip a coin between the 4 and the 5 to see who ends up getting that final spot. Any other thoughts on this bracket, Tom? It looks pretty straightforward, but again, because the defenses are so good, you get hot defensively one game, you limit teams to shooting. You never know. Maybe on the bottom half of the bracket, what could happen.
That's true. There's not a lot of scores in this particular bracket as far as like teams that are deep with people that can put up points. So I think if one of your main scores is having an off night against a good defensive team, it could be a real struggle for you to be able to score, right? And it could come down to free throws. It could come down to, a couple turnovers late in the game. So when things get close in these defensive games, that's when upsets happen. Usually if you're so strong offensively, you're just pulling away. Those are kind of those easy games to win. But when it's close, a defensive battle, a play here or there can really make a difference. So it's going to be tight when it comes down to the end.
So there's 4A. Can't wait to see who is in the championship game because we know it's going to be a good game no matter what. But we anticipate that Harbor Creek, that Corey, that Fairview will get to the state playoffs, and then it's just a matter of where they place on the podium from there. Now we finish with 3A. This, to me, is the most fascinating bracket, and it's the bracket that we've talked about that has the fewest amount of teams, 5. But 4 of the 5 are damn good teams, Tom. And we've talked a lot about 3A as we get to the playoffs. The last couple of weeks, of course, we had the interview with Michaela Presser-Palmer. Northwestern, Seneca, Mercyhurst Prep get a bye. I'm not terribly surprised, but maybe a little surprised that Mercyhurst Prep got the nod over Eisenhower in the 3-4, but I don't think it really it matters, but maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Let's just think about how this could go, Tom. Only 2 teams are making it, which means 2 of the 4 great teams in this bracket with respect to Greenville are going to be left on the shelf. Your thought process, your belief on how you assess this bracket currently.
Wow. I mean, this is a tough one. I think Northwestern definitely gets the nod, for multiple reasons. And not just Michaela. I think their team has really found roles around her, and they play really well. There's other girls that have made shots when she's double teamed, and sometimes when she's double teamed, she's still scoring. So that taking that part out of it, I think Northwestern runs the table for the bracket. A battle with Seneca and Mercyhurst Prep. I think Seneca might be. They have really good size. I really like the 2 or 3 games that I saw them play. I think they're going to be tough for Mercyhurst Prep to beat. But the Eisenhower girls, they're good too. We've talked several episodes of how many close games they've had, right? And they're fun to watch. They can score as well. So it's going to be a battle down there with Eisenhower and Seneca to get into that last spot, I think.
Yeah, I will tell you what, I think when you look at this bracket, it is so fascinating to me with only 2 teams getting in. And I think that this is where the rubber meets the road in this, because all these games are going to be uber competitive because you don't have that backlog of one more opportunity, right? If you don't win in the semifinals. I think Eisenhower is the exact team that Northwestern did not want to face in the second round. I think Northwestern was probably praying that Mercyhurst Prep was the 4 and Eisenhower was the 3. But it's going to be really interesting to see. I think you do have to consider the regular season and exactly how that will go. But again, very, very fascinating stuff here from the 3A bracket, and we'll see exactly how it plays out. All right, that's going to do.
Technical difficulties on my end. Not sure if you can hear me.
All right, you got me now?
I cannot hear you, Isaac.
You got me now? All right, we're having a couple of microphone issues with Tom Koval. That's all right. We're going to end our show from here and call it a day. But we want to thank you again for our District 10 bracket prediction show. Best of luck to all the teams competing, and we wish everyone safe and well games played in this District 10 competition. Have a wonderful rest of your week, everybody. We'll be back to break down the first and second round games in just a little bit next Wednesday on our show. Until then, everyone, have a great rest of your week.